is absolutely free.
Hello everyone, welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast. And for our third segment of today's show, as always, we're doing our midweek NBA power rankings. Now, these power rankings are going to get ever more controversial as the weeks move on, especially at the end of the trade deadline. A lot of movement could be happening, but this is my personal list of the top 5 teams in the NBA right now. And no matter what, there are going to be a lot of skeptics on this list, but it's my personal list. Let me know what you think in the comments if you feel differently. But without further ado, let's jump right into it because it should be a good one. Coming in at number 5 on my list, perhaps the hottest team in the NBA right now, winning 8 straight, including against some top teams out in the West. How about at the number 5 spot, the New York Knicks? This is a really impressive team right now. The informed team, at the very least, in the Eastern Conference. 2.5 games now behind the Boston Celtics for the second position, even though the Celtics, we're going to talk about them a lot in today's show, have been on their own kind of winning streak of sorts, but 8 straight. They went 3-1 this past week against the West, numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5 seeds. So, as you can tell, this Knicks team really turning into form. And if I'm hearing correctly about certain NBA trade rumors, they could be a team that has Kevin Durant as well on them at the end of the trade deadline. This would be crazy to behold because Jalen Brunson is already performing at a high level. Cat's been one of the best free agent additions in the offseason, now translating into the regular season that the Knicks could have possibly hoped for. And in their most recent victory over the third-place Houston Rockets, we're going to be talking about a little bit later as well, and probably one of the most controversial teams on this list in terms of positioning. Brunson finished with 42 points and 10 assists, and to show that he's a dominant closer in the league, a dominant closing point guard, perhaps the best in the league. 17 of those points came in the last 6 minutes. So as you can see, the Knicks are truly rounding into form, dominating teams and good teams in that loaded West. Are you kidding me? Taking on the numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5 seeds out west and going 3-1 on that stretch is pretty impressive if you've asked me. So this could be a team that's constantly rising, especially if those trade rumors are true. But for now, they sit at the number 5 spot. Coming in at the number 4 spot, a team we're going to be talking about a lot today, it seems like, the defending champion, Boston Celtics, who are now on a kind of surprising 4-game winning streak after a little bit of a cold streak at the end of the season, including an impressive, dominating back-and-forth game against the Cleveland Cavaliers last night. But I do feel that it made the trade deadline for Boston a little bit more confusing. A lot of people thought they were going to stand pat. We're going to be talking about how they can continue to navigate the final hours for the trade deadline in today's last segment. But I feel that this team now is rounding into form a little bit. They're starting to prove their mettle, including that comeback win over the 76ers a couple days ago. But they do have a tough schedule coming up. They do face Dallas, then they're on the road at the Garden at New York. They're at Miami, who I don't even know what's going to happen with them in the next couple of hours. But ultimately, I feel like this Celtics team are probably going to stand pat after, the whole Springer thing, but we'll talk about how potentially they can improve. But I say this Celtics team is still going to be dangerous, especially headed into the All-Star break. I know that sometimes teams who are on a bit of a hot streak after a cold streak heading into the All-Star break might fall apart after it, but the Celtics really look good. And it's all going to depend on this 3-game stretch, Dallas, New York, Miami, in terms of how we feel about them heading into the All-Star break and coming out of it. But for now, they sit at number 4 on my rankings. Then at number 3, how about the Cleveland Cavaliers, the team the Boston Celtics beat last night? Still tops in, the Eastern Conference. And I feel like, they were a team that was in a little bit of a rough patch as well. They won a 3-game losing streak in a little bit. Then they reeled off 4 straight wins. And they outscored opponents by 104 points in this stretch. But that just goes to show that this Cavaliers team is more real than people even know. In a moment where they had lost 3 games, they hadn't even lost 3 games to start the season in their first 20. To come back and reel off 4 straight wins was really impressive. But let's talk about one of those wins. On Sunday, they beat the Mavericks in an astounding fashion, but that was ultimately after the news of the Luka Doncic trade had broken and the Mavs were probably shell-shocked, but still, this is an impressive stat. Sam Merrill, an interesting depth piece for this Cleveland Cavaliers team, led the team in that one with 27 points, and he was the 7th different Cavalier to be the high scorer for the team. And this is a team with 3 East All-Stars. I'm really excited to see how they perform in that game as well. I'm really excited to see if Cleveland can build on this remarkable start to the season as the first place team in the Eastern Conference standings, probably going into the All-Star break because they have a very easy schedule. Only Detroit and Washington and Minnesota to worry about before then. But I'm really, really excited to see the tenor of this Cleveland Cavaliers season after the break. And so they ultimately sit at the number 3 position in my rankings. Then at number 2, this is where we get a little bit controversial, because ultimately I feel like this team has been in a bit of a rough stretch, ultimately losing to, of all teams, the Brooklyn Nets twice in the past couple of days. But I still think that this Rockets team are winners in a certain regard, because I feel like, this was often a team discussed in terms of how they might attack the trade deadline, trying to go for a superstar perhaps. But this is a team that really believes and trusts this young core of guys. They really trust guys like Jalen Green, Şengün, a guy like Amen Thompson, who we're going to be talking about a little bit more in terms of this Houston Rockets team as the season goes on. But I really, really, really like how this Rockets team is approaching their rapid rise in the Western Conference. This is a team that, like I said, much like the number 1 team in my power rankings this week, that if you look at them, they're a team that very well could and might just add a piece in the coming stages of the trade-in line. But when I look at the depth and I look at the talent, even in this very weird, like I said, 3-game losing streak where they lost to, of all teams, the Brooklyn Nets, and a game a couple days ago in that crazy closing sequence. As much as those games really were bizarre and puzzling for this dominant Houston Rockets team, the reason why I'm still calling them winners and the reason why I'm still ranking them this highly in my power rankings is because they feel like they won the trade deadline by staying pat. By keeping this young core intact, you're saying that I don't care about these mega deals going on. I don't care about those discussions. And while we are hearing about all the packages they could have possibly sent, they haven't sent them as of yet. They could still potentially, mix it up in this purported Kevin Durant deal coming up. But ultimately, I feel like this Houston Rockets team are winners despite being on this 3-game losing streak. They're at Minnesota, they're at Dallas before that All-Star break and going up against Toronto as well, so not necessarily the hardest of schedules to compound this 3-game losing streak, but ultimately a schedule that they will feel like they can sink their teeth into and head into the All-Star break feeling good, especially if the core still remains intact. But I do want to talk about, before we head into the number 1 player in the ranking, a very special player for this Houston Rockets team, and that is the aforementioned Amen Thompson, a truly incredible player, perhaps becoming the Rookie of the Year, maybe even the Defensive Rookie of the Year for his excellent two-way prowess, but an incredible stat. On Monday against the New York Knicks in one of the games on this 3-game losing streak, he became the 3rd youngest player at 22 years and 4 days old to have a 20-point triple-double at Madison Square Garden since its opening in 1968. And yes, you can say, well, that's too bad that the Rockets couldn't build on that and really supplement this kid who's really being incredible. But I do feel like this is a Rockets team that I'm beginning to rely upon even more because of the trust, ethos they've instilled in this young roster. They know their identity. They know that they can beat any team on any given day. And I feel like even in this rough patch, and even if they trade away a couple of these young players in a big mega deal, I still like this team because they're starting to come into their own. And even in this rough patch, they're going to learn from it. Look at my rankings over the past couple of weeks. A lot of these teams were in rough patches, ranked this highly on my power rankings. So that's why you should never really doubt a team like the Houston Rockets, like any team for that matter, in my top 5. in a rough patch because eventually they get out of it. And I believe that the Rockets will get out of it. They have some tough road tests at Minnesota and Dallas in the coming days, like I said. But I really think that they've already won this trade deadline should all of these players stay with this group. Then at the number one position, obviously, the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is an incredible team, too. We talk about all the stats with all their different lineups, whether Chet's starting, whether Isaiah Hartenstein's starting, whether or not they're both not starting, who is playing center position, what kind of small ball lineups they're going to throw at you each and every night. But still, this team is incredible. And that man at the forefront of this picture is a big reason as to why. Potential MVP if it weren't for Nikola Jokic doing crazy exploits, keeping this Denver Nuggets team afloat, he would be my pick. Shai Gilgeous is an incredible athlete, leading the league in points per game, and he's scoring in bunches. They've had a weird stretch, the Thunder, where they've won a lot of games in dominant fashion, but they have some puzzling losses to the up and down Warriors. They had a couple losses to the Mavs, sans Luka, which now hits a little bit harder saying that, but I do feel like this Thunder team, no matter what lineup they roll out, we constantly always say, still feel like they're the top dog in the Western Conference. Luka trade be damned. Because until you prove that you can beat this Thunder team twice or consecutive times in a row, until they go on a weird losing streak or something, I can't necessarily say that this Thunder's team will be down for long. Yes, they have some puzzling losses in the past couple of weeks. Yes, at some times, you might begin to question whether or not some of the injuries within this squad can pile up and really impact their play, because they do rely on a lot of their depth pieces. But I still believe more in the sum of the Thunder's parts than anyone else in the pundit world, because they've already proven that Shai is the ultimate facilitator, and if you build a good solid core around him that can supplement him and ultimately buy into certain traits that bring out the best in him as a player but also the team as a whole, then you can win a lot of basketball games. But the most impressive thing about Shai is that he had first two 50-point performances of his career in a 4-game span late last month. He has scored in the past 3 games at least 30 points in the first half, including the rematch against the Bucks we talked about on this show. And he scored at least 25 points in the first half 3 times since January 16th, and only Jalen Brunson and Donovan Mitchell have tied him for the most times this current season to date. And I think that that's impressive, but looking at this Thunder team, they've also won the deadline if they keep this core together. And that's what I like about these top 2 teams, right? You might begin to question them if they lose a couple puzzling games, like they both have done in the past couple of weeks. But the reason why I still believe in teams like this, rather than teams like the Lakers and potentially the Mavs after this trade, potentially some other teams, maybe even the Warriors, should they acquire Kevin Durant, maybe even, say, the Suns if they actually get a good piece in this purported trade. I think that relying on a young core and standing pat is smart in today's NBA. It's team friendly, and most importantly, it allows for you to really grow as a team no matter what comes up in the next 5 years if you choose to stay intact. So that's why the Thunder and the Rockets still remain atop my rankings, despite the fact that they have had some weird losses over the past couple of weeks. But teams like the Celtics, the Knicks, can be rising up these rankings very rapidly. So look out for that movement in the future. But let me know what you think about my current rankings. Coming next, we look at a little game of NFL QB matchmaker, talking about potential free agent QBs and where they might end up in the coming weeks. Be right back after this short break to talk about it.